Deep in a snow-covered forest, two children lost their way and stumbled upon a house made entirely of candy. But this isn't your ordinary fairy tale. Inside waits a woman who knows their names, a swan that speaks without words, and a secret that could only be whispered in dreams. What magic hides behind warm cookies and glowing gumdrops? Step inside Lila's sweet dream, if you dare to believe. Snow fell softly outside the cottage windows, swirling in lazy spirals through the cold December air. Inside, the fire crackled gently in the stone hearth, casting a golden glow over the faces of a small family gathered at the table. Though the room was humble, just a single space for eating, sleeping, and living, it held a kind of warmth that came not from the fire, but from love. Callum the father ladled a thin potato and onion soup into 4 wooden bowls. Across the table sat his wife Mara and their 2 children, Lila the elder and her younger brother Finn. They ate quietly at first, their spoons clinking softly, until Callum chuckled and told a small joke about a snowshoe rabbit who had forgotten his boots. The children laughed, and even Mara smiled, though her eyes carried a shadow of worry. It had been a hard year. The firewood Callum chopped sold poorly at market, and the early frost had left their garden nearly barren. There would be no roast goose, no sugary cakes this holiday, only soup and whatever they could make by hand. But they were together. That counted for something. Lila noticed how her parents glanced at each other during dinner, trying to hide their weariness. She wished she could give them something bright, something magical to lift their spirits. But she was only a child, and her pockets were empty. Still, the ache in her heart felt like a wish waiting to take flight. After the dishes were scrubbed clean and put away, Mara fluffed the feather bed and tucked both children into its cozy softness. Their single bed was wide enough for 2 small sleepers, warmed by patchwork quilts and downy layers. Lila pressed her cheek against the pillow and sighed as the firelight flickered across the ceiling. Mara settled beside them with a candle, her soft voice ready to carry them into slumber. "Would you like to hear a story tonight?" she asked. Finn nodded eagerly, his brown eyes wide. "A magical one," he whispered. Lila added, "One we've never heard before." Mara smiled, her eyes distant, as if reaching into the attic of her memory. "There's a tale my grandmother used to tell," she began, "about a girl named Hilda and the gingerbread witch." Lila and Finn turned to her, still and silent. The fire crackled once, then the room fell quiet, except for the lull of their mother's voice. "Long ago," Mara said, "before I was born, my grandmother, Hilda, wandered deep into the woods while picking berries with her parents. The forest was quiet that day, unusually so, and before she realized it, she had wandered far beyond the path." "She was lost?" Finn asked softly. "Yes," Mara nodded. "Terribly lost. But Hilda was no ordinary child. She knew the woods well, how to find a stream which berries were safe, which trees whispered of shelter. She tried to retrace her steps, but the forest had changed. It had grown unfamiliar. Lila imagined herself alone in those deep woods, her boots crunching twigs, heart thudding against her ribs. She gripped Finn's hand beneath the blanket. When night fell, Mara continued. Hilda curled up beneath a pine tree and fell asleep. She dreamed of home, of her mother's singing, and the scent of baking bread. But when she woke, it wasn't to her mother's voice. It was to the scent of ginger and cinnamon. Finn sat up straighter. She found the witch. She found a house. Mara said, pausing. A house made entirely of gingerbread. Its walls were dark and sweet, its windows like panes of sugar glass. And there, on the doorstep, stood a woman, not frightening, not cruel, just old and kind-eyed. What did she do? Lila whispered. She asked Hilda if she was lost. When Hilda said yes, the woman gave her warm gingerbread and summoned a deer with a silver bell around its neck. Follow the deer, she told her. It will lead you home. And it did. Mara leaned forward, her candle casting a soft halo around her face. My grandmother always insisted it truly happened. No one believed her, of course, but she kept a little bell by her bedside until the day she died. The room fell still. Finn was already breathing slowly, eyes closed, but Lila remained awake. Her heart quietly stirred. Outside, snow danced in the dark like falling stars. Inside, she imagined a gingerbread house nestled deep in the woods, warm and waiting. And as Mara kissed her forehead and blew out the candle, Lila sank into dreams. Morning arrived with a hush, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. The pale light of dawn slipped through the frosted windows of the cottage, turning everything silver. Outside, the world was transformed, quiet, glistening, blanketed in snow, so thick and soft, it looked like a dream given form. Lila stirred. First, her cheeks still warm from sleep, and her thoughts wrapped in fragments of the story her mother had told the night before. In her mind, she still saw the sugar glass windows, the cinnamon walls, the kind eyes of the old woman. For a moment, she wasn't sure if it had been a dream or something more. She reached over and gently nudged her brother. Finn, she whispered, let's go outside before Mama and Papa wake up. Finn blinked, stretching under the covers. Why? To build a snowman, Lila said. It's perfect snow. Look, they bundled into their warmest things, coats pulled over pajamas, scarves, knotted quickly, mittens tugged onto sleepy hands. The wooden floor creaked softly underfoot as they tiptoed past the fire, which had burned low in the hearth, but still glowed faintly. Outside, the world greeted them with silence. The snow was deep and glittered like crystal sugar under the rising sun. Every tree was dressed in frost. Lila held out her hand, catching a single perfect flake. It melted on her palm like a secret. Before they could build their snowman, they needed the proper things: stones for eyes, twigs for arms, maybe a pine cone for a nose. So they wandered lightly, stepping into the trees near their home, whispering guesses about the best branches and pointing out snow-laced bushes shaped like sleeping animals. They didn't mean to go far, but each time Finn found a stick, Lila would say, "Wait, I think I see a better one over there," and off they'd go again. The forest, familiar by day, had become something new in the snow, brighter, deeper, quieter. The soft crunch of their boots and the whisper of falling flakes were the only sounds, and slowly, gently, the trees swallowed the trail behind them. Lila stopped. She turned around. The little trail of footprints that had followed them from the cottage had disappeared beneath a new layer of snow. The path home, so familiar just moments ago, was gone. Her heart gave a quick thump. "Finn," she said softly. He looked up at her, his mittened hands holding a stick like a sword. "Are we lost?" Lila didn't answer right away. She didn't want to scare him. She took his hand. "Let's just walk a little more," she said gently. "Maybe the cottage is right around the next bend." But bend after bend, the forest remained strange. Icy, glittering, beautiful, but unkind in its stillness. The deeper they walked, the more it felt like the woods were watching, yet strangely. Lila noticed something. She wasn't cold. Neither was Finn. Though the wind whispered softly, it didn't bite. Their hands stayed warm in their mittens, their cheeks pink, but not chilled. And then something moved. A flutter of red darted through the branches ahead. A bird, small and bright, the color of fire. A cardinal. It landed on a snow-covered bough and chirped once, almost as if in greeting. Lila's breath caught. "That bird," she whispered. "It's like the one in the story." The cardinal hopped to another branch. Then another, always a few steps ahead, always turning just enough so its black eyes met hers. As if waiting, Lila didn't speak. She just took Finn's hand and followed. They walked through the snow, following the bird's flickering trail, past trees draped in white, over tiny frozen creeks, beneath branches heavy with snow. It was as if the world had paused, holding still, just for them. And then a curl of smoke. Lila smelled it before she saw it, sweet and warm, like sugar melting in a pan. She turned to Finn. "Do you smell that?" He nodded. "Cookies." Beyond a curtain of pines, the clearing appeared. And in the very center stood a cottage, unlike anything she had ever imagined. Not quite real, not quite dream. Its walls were deep brown like baked cinnamon, and its roof was sloped and glittering with frosting white snow. Gumdrops dotted the window ledges. Peppermint sticks framed the door. And from the chimney, thin smoke curled into the morning sky, fragrant with vanilla and something softer. The red bird flew to the roof and landed gently. Lila and Finn stood frozen in awe. "Is that?" Finn whispered. "I think it is," Lila breathed. The gingerbread house. But now it wasn't just a story. It was standing in front of them, quiet and real and waiting. And though her feet felt rooted in the snow, Lila knew deep in her chest, in the part of her heart where dreams lived, that the house had been waiting for them all along. The gingerbread cottage stood quietly in the clearing, bathed in a golden morning glow. It looked like something drawn from the heart of a storybook, charming improbable and warm, even in the cold snow. A sweet hush fell over the clearing, as if the whole forest was watching and waiting. Lila's hand trembled as she reached for Finn's. "What do we do?" he whispered. She took a step forward. "We knock." The children walked slowly up a path lined with candy canes, half buried in snow. The sugar crystals on the path glittered underfoot. When they reached the door, a curved wooden shape with a peppermint swirl at its center, Lila raised her hand and gave it a gentle knock. For a moment, there was silence. Then click, a small wooden peephole creaked open just above them. One round eye peered out through a round spectacles, blinking once, then twice. Lila stood tall, her voice soft but steady. "Hello. We're lost, and we wondered if you might help us." The eye narrowed kindly. Then, without a word, the peephole closed, and the entire door swung open with a soft creak. There stood a woman, round and warm, with silver hair pulled into a soft braid, and rosy cheeks like apples in winter. Her long dress was a shade of blueberry blue, and over it she wore a red checkered apron dusted with flour. Her smile was like sunshine on snow. "My stars," she said warmly. "You must be Lila and Finn." The children gasped. "How do you know our names?" Finn asked. The woman chuckled. "I have my ways. Come in, my darlings. You've arrived just in time." Too astonished to question it further, they stepped into the warmth. The cottage was alive with smells: vanilla cinnamon, chocolate, and something rich and golden they couldn't quite name. The kitchen glowed, lit by strings of twinkling lights that blinked like fireflies. A kettle was whistling on the stove, and trays of baked goods lined the counter. A large table was covered in bowls of colorful, icing wooden spoons and jars of sugar sprinkles. Everything seemed to hum with the joy of preparation. "I'm Eldra," the woman said, "and I'm behind on my baking. The house must be decorated before nightfall. I can't do it alone." Lila looked around, enchanted. You live here?" "I do," Eldra said. "This is the sugar cottage. It appears only when it is truly needed," Finn whispered. "Are you the gingerbread witch?" Eldra gave a merry laugh. "I suppose I am, but not the kind from scary tales. I don't eat children, I feed them." She pointed to a rack full of warm gingerbread. "Help yourselves, but only after you wash up. And then, I hope you're ready to bake." They nodded eagerly as they washed their hands in a porcelain basin shaped like a snowflake. Lila whispered to Finn, "This is just like Mama's story, but it's real." Finn grinned, his eyes shining. "The best kind of real." Eldra handed them each a fluffy apron. Hers had red hearts, and his was scattered with tiny candy canes. She clapped her hands together with joy. "Now then, Lila, you'll help me with the icing. Finn, I think you'd be wonderful at rolling dough." For hours, the cottage rang with laughter and warmth. Finn kneaded and rolled sweet sugar dough with a wooden pin almost as tall as he was. Lila helped Eldra frost star-shaped cookies, carefully tracing the edges with swirling patterns of red and white icing. "You both have a touch of magic in your hands," Eldra told them. Not everyone can decorate with care and kindness. At one point, Eldra disappeared through a door and returned with a tray of golden toffee. She placed it on the table and handed Finn a wooden spoon. Want to help me break this into pieces? With glee, he raised the spoon and brought it down. Crack, sending shards of toffee skittering across the table. Lila giggled as she gathered them up into a bowl. Try one, Eldra urged. The toffee melted on their tongues, buttery and warm, like sunshine, turned into candy. As the afternoon grew older, the children wrapped chewy caramels in wax paper, lined sugar cookies on a tray for cooling, and helped Eldra pour ruby red syrup into molds for gumdrops. The fire crackled gently in the hearth. Snow dusted the windows in soft silence. Everything glowed warm, golden, and full of sweetness. Then, as they finished arranging the gumdrops to set, Eldra whispered, "Would you like to help me decorate the house?" Lila and Finn's eyes lit up. "Yes, please," they chorused. Outside, the sun had begun to dip, casting long blue shadows over the snowy clearing. But in the sugar cottage, time felt slow and enchanted. The children followed Eldra toward the door, arms full of treats. As it opened, a gust of cold air entered, and with it the scent of pine and something else. Something old and secret. Lila paused, heart beating faster, for this was not just a visit, it was a beginning. Outside, the world was dipped in gold and ivory. The last light of day spilled across the snow-covered clearing, casting long blue shadows that danced between the trees. The cottage behind them glowed warmly, like the center of a dream. Lila and Finn stepped out into the chill, each carrying a basket brimming with treats. "All right, my sweet decorators," Eldra said, following them out. "It's time to make this house shimmer for the holiday." The air smelled of pine needles and peppermint. The snow beneath their boots crunched softly like sugar underfoot. Ember, the red cardinal, fluttered down from a nearby branch and chirped once, then settled on the frosted windowsill. Watching, Eldra handed Lila a bowl of sparkling gumdrops. "These," she said, "go on every window. Make sure they twinkle." Lila nodded, carefully, pressing one candy after another into the snowy sill, arranging them in a perfect rainbow. The gumdrops stuck easily, their colors vivid against the white frost. Meanwhile, Finn was given a stack of wrapped caramel squares and a small tin bucket. "These go in the bird bath," Eldra instructed. "Let's make it a fountain of sweetness." Finn ran over to the little stone basin half covered in snow. He poured the candies in until they nearly overflowed, each one catching the light like a miniature gift. Lila giggled. "Even the birds get dessert here." Eldra smiled. Everyone deserves something sweet this time of year. Next, she led them to a tall evergreen tree beside the cottage. "This," she said, "is our candy tree. Every branch must hold a sugar star." They got to work. The cookies were delicate and golden, shaped like 5 pointed stars, and dusted with fine sugar. Lila reached as high as she could, resting the cookies gently in the branches. Finn climbed onto a small stool to reach the upper limbs, laughing as the snow slipped off and dusted his curls. When they were done, the tree sparkled with dozens of sugary stars. It looked like it had captured pieces of the sky. Lila stepped back, admiring it. "It's magical," Eldra nodded, but her eyes were far away for a moment, as if seeing something only she remembered. "Yes, it is." The final task was the path. Eldra produced a tray of red candy apples, glossy and wrapped in clear paper. The children were instructed to stick them into the snow, lining the walkway, one by one, their wooden sticks anchoring them like glowing lanterns. By the time they finished, the whole cottage looked like it had grown from sugar and dreams. Eldra stood with her hands on her hips, beaming. "You've done beautifully. The guests will be here soon." Guests. Finn blinked. "Wait and see," Eldra said, her voice playful and secretive. She ushered them back inside, just as the wind began to pick up, sweeping tiny snowflakes across the clearing. Inside the sugar cottage, the fire had been stirred, casting golden flickers across the floorboards. 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa waited on the table, each crowned with melting marshmallows. Lila and Finn sat their cheeks flushed from the cold and sipped slowly. The warmth was heavenly. It melted through their hands, through their chests, toes. The chocolate was rich and thick, like drinking silk. As they finished the last sweet drops, Eldra called them to the window. "Look," she whispered, pulling back the lace curtain. Outside, beneath the twilight sky, the guests had come. Dozens of forest animals emerged from the trees, stepping softly into the clearing. A young deer nosed gently at the candy path. A line of birds swooped down to the sugar stars on the tree. Squirrels darted around the bird bath, tucking caramels into their cheeks. Foxes, chipmunks, even a pair of owls joined in moving carefully, respectfully, as if they understood the wonder of the place. No creature fought. No one took more than they needed. Lila gasped, her heart fluttering. "It's like a forest feast." "It is," Eldra said, watching the scene with glowing eyes. "Every year on this night, I share what I've made with those who cannot bake for themselves." Finn pressed his face to the glass. "They look so happy." "They are," Eldra said softly, "because you helped make it." Lila turned from the window. "You really are a witch, aren't you?" Eldra looked down, eyes twinkling. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just someone who remembers what it means to share." There was something ancient and kind in her voice, something that wrapped around the heart like a soft shawl. The wind blew gently outside, rustling the branches of the candy tree. The cardinal ember hopped onto the windowsill again and gave a low chirp. Eldra turned. "That's your cue." "Our cue for what Lila asked." Eldra knelt, wrapping their mittens and scarves around them. She handed them a small basket, smaller than before, but heavy with something wrapped in cloth. "These are for your family," she said. "Sweets for the holiday, and a memory you'll carry forever." Finn's eyes went wide. "You mean it's time to go?" Eldra smiled, but her expression was bittersweet. "It's always hardest to leave a warm place, but home is waiting, and Ember will guide you." She opened the door. The wind kissed their cheeks, and the last light of day lingered like a sigh. Lila looked up at Eldra. "Will we ever come back? If you believe," she said, "you might find your way again." And with that, Ember fluttered from the windowsill and took flight, circling once above their heads, before gliding into the snowy trees. Lila took Finn's hand. Together, they followed the cardinal into the whispering woods. The sky turned a dusky lavender as Ember fluttered ahead, dipping between the trees like a dancing ember from a fire. Lila and Finn followed Boots crunching on sugar-powdered snow. Behind them, the lights of the sugar cottage faded into the forest's embrace, glowing like a memory, sweet, warm, and golden. Lila clutched the basket close. It was still warm. She could smell gingerbread cinnamon and something else. Something like home. "Do you think Mama and Papa will believe us?" Finn asked. Breath misting the air, Lila smiled gently. "They'll believe the basket," Ember called softly ahead and landed on a snowy branch. The forest had quieted. No wind, no bird calls, just the sound of their boots and the gentle thrum of anticipation. The path narrowed as the trees thickened branches, heavy with snow. The children ducked beneath icicle-draped boughs, each step more hushed than the last. It felt like the forest was leaning in, listening. Then, at last, the woods opened. Before them lay a wide, frozen pond. Mist hovered just above the icy surface, and the world was tinted silver blue, as if it had been dipped in moonlight. The sky reflected on the still water, doubling the stars. "There's no bridge," Finn said, clutching her hand. "We wait," Lila whispered. She said something would come. They didn't have to wait long. Out of the mist, smooth as a dream, glided a swan, immense, white as clouds, its feathers glistening like pearls. It didn't flap or cry. It simply appeared sailing toward them with quiet grace, its black eyes calm and deep as shadowed water. "It's real," Finn breathed. The swan reached the shore and stopped. With a small nod of its head, it lowered its wings gently, revealing a soft hollow between them. "Come on," Lila said, her voice full of wonder. Holding the basket, she climbed onto the swan's back. Finn followed, careful, quiet. The swan barely stirred under their weight. Once they were settled, it turned silently and pushed off. The pond held its breath as they drifted across the surface, smooth as glass. Snowflakes fell slowly around them, each flake sparkling like a tiny light. The trees on the far shore waited like guardians in a tale. Finn leaned back against Lila, warm and drowsy. "I never thought snow could be so quiet," he whispered. "It's listening," she replied. Halfway across, Lila glanced behind. Ember still followed, perched on the swan's tail feathers. The little red bird ruffled its wings, content and watchful. She turned forward again, eyes wide, as the swan sailed deeper into silver silence. A hush settled over her mind like a soft blanket pulled up to her chin. No worries, no rush, just the glide of feathers and the whisper of snow. Then slowly, the dark trees ahead parted to reveal a small slope dusted in snow. There beyond the far shore, lights twinkled, warm lights, golden and flickering like candle flames behind glass. "Our house," Finn murmured. The swan eased to the bank and stopped. With great gentleness, it lowered its wing again, creating a soft landing. Lila and Finn slipped off carefully. Ember flew to Lila's shoulder, and chirped once. "Thank you," Lila said, bowing her head to the great bird. The swan blinked once, turned, and glided away, vanishing into the mist like a memory already fading. The children stood at the edge of the woods. Their home glowed just beyond the hill. They walked slowly, quietly, snow soft beneath their feet. Their cabin's chimney puffed a lazy ribbon of smoke into the cold night air. In the windows, golden light flickered. Somewhere inside, a fire crackled, and their parents stirred. Lila paused. "Do you think it was all a dream?" Finn squeezed her hand. Dreams don't come with candy baskets. When they reached the front door, it opened before they could knock. Their mother stood there, wide-eyed, her hands to her heart. Behind her, their father froze mid-step, eyes full of relief and disbelief. "Lila, Finn." Their mother breathed. "We're home," Lila said softly. Her mother dropped to her knees, gathering them in trembling arms, tears falling freely. Their father joined, enveloping them in warmth and safety. "We were so worried," he whispered into their hair. "Where did you go?" "It's a long story," Lila replied, meeting Finn's eyes. Then she offered them the basket. Their mother took it, gently gasping when she opened the lid. Inside were rows of perfect cookies, wrapped caramels, shining gumdrops, and warm gingerbread still soft in the middle. A sugar star rested on top. "Where?" Her mother began trailing off. Lila leaned in close. "Do you remember the story of the sugar witch?" Her mother froze. Her eyes flicked from the basket to Lila's face, searching. "Her name was Eldra," Lila whispered. "And she was real." Behind them, the wind shifted, and snow began to fall again, silent, soft, and glowing in the starlight. That night, the family sat close by the fire, wrapped in quilts, sharing the sweets and their stories. No one spoke of dreams. No one asked questions that needed answers, because some magic isn't meant to be explained, only remembered and shared. The next morning, golden light spilled across the woodcutter's cottage like syrup over warm bread. A quiet peace hummed through the house as Lila stirred under her feather bed. She blinked slowly, half dreaming the scent of cinnamon still lingering in the air. For a moment, she wondered if it had all truly happened. The gingerbread house, the caramel wrapping, the sugar-starred tree. Her fingers itched to hold a gumdrop again, to press it into a soft bed of sugar. She sat up. The basket. It wasn't a dream. There it was, right by the fireplace, still brimming with sweet treasures. Her heart fluttered as she slipped from bed and padded across the wooden floor in her wool socks. Finn was already awake, sitting on the rug, hands cradling a peppermint swirl, as though it were made of glass. "She left it," he whispered. "All of it." Lila nodded, kneeling beside him. She said, "The forest shares with those who walk it kindly." Their parents moved softly in the background, whispering in the kitchen, as if the house, too, didn't want to break the fragile spell of morning magic. Their mother glanced at them, eyes warm, but didn't ask questions yet. Their father only smiled, rubbing his beard, as though remembering a tale he hadn't told in years. They spent the morning by the fire, nibbling sugar cookies and sipping tea sweetened with honey. The world outside was still wrapped in white and silver, but inside, it felt like a war storybook page. After lunch, their mother finally asked, "Would you like to tell us where all of this came from?" Lila and Finn exchanged a glance, so they told her everything. The thin soup, the wish in the night, the glowing snowfall, the red cardinal, the gingerbread house, the candy making, the animals, even the ride on the great white swan. Their parents listened in quiet awe. They didn't laugh. They didn't interrupt. They just listened. And when it was done, their mother touched Lila's cheek gently. Some say the sugar witch only appears to children who carry kindness in their hearts. Was she real? Finn asked, uncertain. Their father looked out the window toward the forest. Some things aren't meant to be proven, he said. Only remembered. Lila leaned back against the couch cushion, heart full. Not everything needed explaining. Sometimes it was enough to feel the truth deep inside. That evening, as the stars appeared one by one above the forest, Lila pulled her little wooden box from under the bed, the one where she kept drawings, feathers, and stones with holes through the middle. Her treasure box. She added a sugar star to it. Next to it, she placed a tiny caramel wrapped in wax paper and a single gumdrop still glinting in the candlelight. She'd never eat them. These weren't for tasting. These were for remembering. Days passed in gentle joy. The holiday came with laughter, handmade gifts, and stories told by the fire. The family feasted not just on sweets, but on warmth, love, and the kind of peace that only comes when you've been somewhere secret and returned home again. But even as the days moved forward, something else stirred in Lila. A tug, a shimmer in her chest, a feeling that the story wasn't over yet. One snowy morning, Ember reappeared, tapping gently on the frosted glass with his beak. Lila opened the window, and the red cardinal fluttered in, landing gracefully on the edge of the kitchen table. He dropped something small beside her teacup, a piece of paper folded once, tied with a red thread. Lila untied it slowly. Finn leaned over her shoulder. Inside, in soft, loopy handwriting, were just 6 words. "You are invited back. Warmly, Eldra." Lila's breath caught. Finn grinned. She remembered us. Their mother peered over their shoulders and smiled. Seems the forest hasn't finished its story. The children looked at each other, wide-eyed, the snow beyond the window glowing with possibility. They didn't know when the path would reopen or what the next chapter would hold, but they knew they would be ready, because once you followed the call of a red bird through a forest of snow, once you've baked gumdrops with a sugar witch and watched animals feast on candy under starlight, you're never quite the same. You become something new, something a little more magical. That night, Lila dreamed again, not of the candy kitchen or the warm sugar cookies, but of a winding path beneath silver trees leading into a forest that whispered her name. It began with a whisper in the wind. On the 7th morning, after receiving Eldra's note, Lila heard it, soft, fluttering, like a page being turned somewhere deep in the forest. It was the kind of sound that made you pause with your teacup halfway to your lips, that made your heart hum with something ancient and unseen. She stepped onto the porch, boots crunching in the snow, and breathed deeply. The air was sharper today, carrying a scent of fir needles, and something sweeter, like honey, melting over a warm biscuit. Finn appeared beside her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Did you hear it?" Lila only nodded. They both knew what it meant. The way had opened again. That afternoon, they packed carefully. Mittens, scarves, woolen coats, but also a notebook and pencil, because Lila felt that this journey might be one worth remembering in her own words. They filled a small pouch with bread and cheese and tucked it inside a satchel with a flask of tea. Their mother kissed their foreheads. "Be safe. Be kind." Their father wrapped extra socks in a cloth and tucked them into Lila's bag. Every path worth walking is better with warm feet. Then, without another word, the children followed the line of cardinal feathers Ember had left for them on the windowsill. They drifted like rose-red petals in the snow, forming a trail that wound away from the cottage down into the woods and beyond. The forest greeted them with soft silence. Sunlight filtered through the trees like gold dust, and the snow sparkled like it had been dusted with crushed sugar. It felt familiar, but new, as though the woods had remembered them and had changed just slightly in their honor. Ember fluttered overhead, dipping and soaring, never too far ahead. He stopped now and then to chirp, as if asking, "Are you still with me?" And they always were. After an hour's walk, they reached a place Lila recognized instantly, a cluster of stones arranged in a ring like an invitation. It had been buried in snow before. Now the stones glowed faintly, as if warmed from within. "Step through," said Finn, reaching for her hand. Together they did. The air changed the moment they passed the ring. Warmer, laced with the scent of vanilla and rose petals. The snow underfoot softened no longer, crunching, but whispering. And then, as if exhaled by the forest itself, the cottage appeared. The gingerbread house stood nestled in a blanket of snow, its rooftops dusted with icing sugar. Gumdrops lined the windows. The bird bath was empty now, but the tree still sparkled with sugar stars. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney. Lila's breath caught. "I didn't dream it," she whispered. "No," said Finn. "You dreamed it true?" As they approached, the candy cane fence opened with a gentle creak, and the door swung inward before they could even knock. Eldra stood in the doorway, her cheeks rosy as ever, flour on her apron, and joy in her eyes. "Well," she said, "you came. We never forgot," said Lila. "Of course not," Eldra said with a wink. "You're the kind who remembers." She ushered them inside, where warmth enveloped them, like a hug from the inside out. The scent of vanilla caramel and something fruity simmering on the stove filled the air. The fire crackled gently, and fresh gingerbread cooled on the table. "You came just in time," Eldra said, setting out mugs of steaming spiced cider. "There's much to do." "What are we making this time?" Finn asked eagerly, removing his coat. Eldra chuckled. "Oh, more than sweets, my dear. This year, we'll be crafting enchantments." Lila blinked. "Enchanted sweets," the witch nodded. "Each with a purpose, each carrying a feeling. Joy, hope, courage, rest. The forest is growing hungrier for more than sugar. It needs reminders of magic kindness and care." Finn's eyes grew wide. How do you make a candy taste like courage? With the right memory, Eldra said, touching her chest, and a whisper of belief. She moved toward the back of the kitchen and gestured to a row of glass jars. Each one shimmered faintly, some with golden dust, others with soft blue light. These, she said, are your ingredients. Lila stepped closer. One jar seemed to pulse gently like it was breathing. I'm going to teach you how to shape stories into sweets, Eldra said. How to wrap a wish in caramel. How to stir laughter into peppermint bark. Are you ready? Lila felt something stir in her chest. She nodded. I think we are, said Finn. The rest of the day passed like a waking dream. They didn't simply bake. They listened. They remembered. And they poured those feelings into the sugar, the syrup, the dough. Eldra guided them with quiet wisdom, showing how to mix a sigh of relief into honey or tuck a lullaby into a cookie's heart. They created joy drops wrapped in sunlight-colored foil, peppermint peace sticks, gumdrops that gave you dreams of flying, caramels that slowed your heartbeat when you were scared. By evening, the table overflowed with enchanted sweets, each with its own shimmer. But Lila knew this story wasn't just about candy anymore. It was about what you could give the world if you carried warmth, wonder, and a little bit of wild hope. Evening fell like velvet across the sky. In the gingerbread cottage, Lila and Finn stood before a long wooden table, their arms lightly dusted with flour and sugar. The day had passed in a blink, a golden blur of stirring shaping and whispering magic into every treat. Now it was time to share them. Eldra moved gracefully about the kitchen, placing the finished confections into small silk pouches. Each one was carefully tied with ribbon and marked with a tiny wax seal, a sun for joy, a crescent moon for dreams, a star for courage, and a snowflake for peace. These are not for eating just yet, Eldra said with a wink, placing the last pouch into a woven basket. Tonight, they must be given. Lila looked up. Given to who? The old witch smiled, her eyes twinkling. To the forest. Finn tilted his head. You mean the animals? Some, yes, Eldra replied. But also the trees, the wind, the places that remember sadness, and the souls who've forgotten how to hope. That last part made Lila's chest ache, like a bell had rung gently behind her ribs. They wrapped themselves again in their warm coats, mittens, and scarves. Eldra handed each of them a lantern filled with soft golden light, and then lifted the basket of pouches into her arms. Come, it's time, she said. Outside, the world shimmered. The stars above glistened like frost against the dark sky. Snow blanketed the world, yet the air was still expectant. The trio moved slowly down the cottage path. Lila noticed something new, tiny glass jars hanging from the trees, each containing a single flickering light swaying gently in the breeze. They're called soul sparks, Eldra explained. Memories, wishes, or pieces of love once offered to the woods. Tonight, they wake. Ember, the red cardinal, darted through the trees above them like a flame. He chirped softly, guiding them toward the first stop, a clearing filled with sleeping deer, curled under snow-covered ferns. Eldra approached and knelt placing one pouch of sugar-dusted toffee near a nest of leaves. For rest, she whispered. Lila followed, placing a star-marked pouch nearby. For courage, she murmured. The moment the pouches touched the ground, a faint shimmer pulsed through the snow, and the deer twitched in its sleep, curling closer into warmth. They moved on to a frozen stream, where the ice sang faintly beneath the surface. Finn knelt and set down a peppermint bark tied with a snowflake ribbon. For calm, he whispered, to the base of a tree with deep scars in its bark, Lila left a moon-marked candy. For healing dreams, at each stop, something changed. A branch lifted. A gust of wind hummed like a lullaby. Once, even the stars above seemed to blink a little brighter. Then they reached the clearing. It was vast and silent, a wide circle surrounded by ancient pine trees, their boughs heavy with snow. In the center stood a small stone pedestal, worn by time. Eldra placed the basket atop it. This, she said, is where we leave the last of them for those who wander. Lila didn't ask what that meant. She knew. Somehow in her heart, she understood this was a place for lost ones, for hearts searching for something they couldn't name. With great care, they emptied the remaining pouches around the pedestal, arranging them like petals of a flower. Then they stood in stillness. Above, the sky opened fully, and snow began to fall thick, slow, and shimmering, like falling stars. Eldra raised her hand and closed her eyes. To all who feel forgotten, to those in pain, to dreamers whose light has dimmed, may this sweetness remind you that you are loved. The wind shifted, and from the forest's edge, shapes began to emerge. First came a fox stepping lightly through the snow, then a group of rabbits, a limping badger, a weasel, and then, more strangely, glowing forms, figures made of mist and memory. A woman cloaked in light, a boy with wings, an old man whose eyes sparkled with starlight. Spirits. They moved toward the pedestal, each taking a sweet. No words were spoken. Only the sound of the wind through branches, the soft crunch of snow, and the flutter of wings above. Lila stood frozen, her eyes wide. She watched a spirit pause beside her, a girl about her age, translucent and shining faintly blue. The spirit smiled and placed a hand over Lila's heart. Warmth bloomed there. "Thank you," the spirit whispered. Then she faded into snowlight. When it was done, the clearing was empty again. Only the pedestal remained bare and clean. Eldra turned to them. "Now you know. These gifts we craft are not just for joy. They are medicine. They are memory. They are hope." Lila nodded, slowly, her chest still warm, where the spirit had touched her. She and Finn followed Eldra back toward the cottage. The soul sparks swayed gently above their heads. Ember flew close behind his red feathers, gleaming even in the moonlight. Back inside, Eldra placed her empty basket by the fire and turned to the children. "I think," she said softly, "you've learned the secret of the sweets." Lila's voice was quiet. "They're not just made with sugar." No, Eldra agreed. "They're made with soul." That night, as the fire crackled and the wind hummed gently, outside, Lila fell asleep, wrapped in warmth, not just from her blanket, but from everything they had given away. The morning after their midnight journey, Lila awoke to the scent of spiced cocoa and the comforting creak of the gingerbread cottage as it settled into the snowy silence. Finn was still sleeping, curled up like a kitten under his thick quilt, his cheeks flushed from dreams. Lila slid quietly from bed, her feet landing on a warm, woven rug. The fire was already lit, casting dancing shadows across the wood-paneled walls. Eldra stood at the stove, stirring something in a cast-iron pot. She didn't turn around, but spoke with a knowing voice. "You slept deeply," she said. Lila nodded, rubbing her eyes. "I dreamed about the girl again. The one from the clearing." "Ah," Eldra said, smiling faintly. "Some spirits leave a longer echo." Lila wrapped herself in her shawl and wandered toward the frosted window. The world beyond was blanketed in quiet snow, glowing faintly under the pale morning sun. Yet even in the light of day, something magical still shimmered around the edges of the world. "Is it time to go home?" she asked softly. Eldra set the spoon down and turned, drying her hands on her apron. "Almost," she said. "But first, the forest has one final task for you." Lila's heart fluttered not with fear, but with that same curious excitement she had felt when the gingerbread cottage first appeared in the clearing. Eldra woke Finn gently, whispering something in his ear that made him smile even before opening his eyes. The siblings dressed quickly, donning their coats and boots again, while Ember the cardinal hopped along the windowsill impatiently. "Come now," Eldra said, handing them each a small bundle wrapped in forest green cloth. One last gift, one last journey. Outside, the air was crisp and silvered with frost. The snow crunched softly beneath their boots as Ember led the way, fluttering from branch to branch. Like a living compass, they followed him into the trees, past familiar landmarks, now dressed in fresh white. The caramel-filled bird bath, the gumdrop-lined windows, the peppermint candy path. All remnants of the night before seemed somehow older, now like sacred relics gently melting into memory. Eventually, they reached a glade where the trees parted, revealing a frozen pond wide as a field. Its surface was a sheet of mirror-like ice, so smooth it reflected the pale blue sky above and the golden outline of the rising sun. And there, near the edge of the water, stood the swan. She was larger than Lila had imagined, pure white, with feathers that shimmered like pearl in the light. Her black eyes were gentle and deep, and her long neck dipped once in greeting as they approached. Eldra's voice echoed in Lila's memory. "She will take you across." Without a word, Lila and Finn stepped forward. The swan lowered her wings, forming a cradle between them. Lila climbed in first, holding her green bundle tight, then helped Finn settle in behind her. The moment they were balanced, the swan turned gracefully toward the center of the pond. With a soft push from her strong legs, they were off. The glide was effortless. No sound came from the water beneath them, and yet they moved quickly and surely across the pond. The forest around them seemed to hush in reverence, every tree bowing slightly in the still air. Lila looked around and felt the hush settle into her bones. She turned toward her brother and whispered, "Do you think she's real?" Finn didn't need to ask who she meant. "I think everything here is," he replied. Halfway across the pond, something changed. The snow began to fall, not like before, in quiet, fluttering flakes, but in tiny, glowing motes of golden light. They weren't cold. They weren't even really snow. They were memories. Lila reached out, and one landed gently on her mitten. It shimmered, then opened like a flower. Inside, she saw herself laughing with her mother by the fireplace, hands sticky from baking cookies. Another landed on Finn's sleeve, revealing an image of their father, carving a tiny toy boat for his birthday. More and more memories drifted down, settling in the folds of their coats, in their hair, in their hearts. The swan glided on a silent vessel through the sea of remembrance. When they reached the far shore, the snow of light faded. The swan knelt low to let them off. Lila turned, wanting to say thank you, but the swan simply blinked once and dipped her head, then silently drifted back into the mist. The forest on this side felt different. The trees looked familiar now. The curve of a certain branch, the shape of the hill in the distance. Lila inhaled deeply. "We're close," she said. They followed a winding trail, their boots crunching along a now visible path. The air smelled like home pine smoke, and the faintest touch of something baking. As they crested the final hill, the woodcutter's cottage came into view, nestled against the slope, with a chimney, puffing gentle gray curls of smoke into the sky. Lila and Finn stood still for a long moment, watching. Then, as if by shared instinct, they reached into their green bundles, and each pulled out one final treat. A single gingerbread star. No words were spoken. They each took a bite, savoring the soft sweetness, the warmth that bloomed from the center outward. It wasn't just flavor. It was belonging. They had come home, and something told them the forest had come with them. The cottage door creaked softly as Lila and Finn stepped inside, bringing with them the scent of snow and gingerbread. Their mother, Mira, turned from the stove with a gasp of surprise. "Where have you two been?" she asked, though her voice was more curious than stern. Lila and Finn looked at each other, sharing a secret smile. "Just outside," Finn said, innocently brushing a few snowflakes from his scarf. Mira didn't press. Instead, she motioned to the table. "Well, come in and warm up. There's tea, and I just pulled a fresh loaf from the oven." They kicked off their boots and settled at the table, the warmth of the home enveloping them like a soft blanket. Everything felt more vivid now. The colors, the smells, even the tick of the clock on the mantel. The world outside was magical, yes, but so was this being home, surrounded by love. As Mira served them steaming cups of honey tea, she tilted her head. "You both look like you've grown overnight," she remarked. Finn laughed. "We kind of did." Lila reached into the basket, still nestled in her arms. She pulled out the final treat, inside a single, perfect sugar cookie shaped like a star. Its edges were frosted in delicate red swirls, and a single silver pearl sat at its center. Mira's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" Lila looked at her mother, and for a moment considered telling her everything. About Eldra, the candy house, the cardinal, the swan. But something held her back, not from mistrust, but from a quiet understanding that some magic needed to stay folded between two hearts. "Someone kind gave it to us," she said gently, breaking the cookie in two and handing half to Finn. They each took a bite. The flavor was unlike anything Mira had ever baked, light as snow, soft as a whisper, warm as a memory. Mira closed her eyes, smiling, without asking more questions. Later that evening, as the fire crackled low and snow drifted softly outside, Lila sat near the window, watching the stars. One in particular twinkled a little brighter than the others. She had a feeling it was for her. Behind her, Mira and Finn were arranging pine cones on the mantel, preparing for the holiday. Music played faintly from a wind-up music box, its lullaby gentle as the flicker of candlelight. As Lila stared out into the forest beyond the glass, she saw movement, just a flicker. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a red cardinal. It perched on a low branch, watching her with patient eyes. A moment later, a second bird joined it, a soft gray dove. She smiled. Not everything magical had to end. Time passed. Winter turned to spring, and then to summer. The forest changed. The snow melted, but the memory of the gingerbread cottage never left her, nor did the taste of that final star-shaped cookie. It lived in her like a soft echo, gentle and constant. Every so often, she would find something on the forest floor, a gumdrop pebble nestled between moss, a ribbon of caramel caught on a branch, a faint scent of sugar drifting through the trees on the wind. Little reminders. And then, as autumn rolled back around and the air grew crisp, something unexpected happened. One morning, as Lila opened the front door to fetch firewood, she found a small envelope tucked beside the doorstep. It was sealed with a golden wax stamp in the shape of a cookie star. Her heart leapt. She brought it inside, and with Finn by her side, they carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note on parchment. "Dearest Lila and Finn, your kindness, creativity, and laughter were the sweetest ingredients of last winter. If you would like to help again, the path will reveal itself under the first full moon of snow. Yours in Ginger and Magic E." There was a question in their minds. That evening, Lila prepared a satchel with mittens, scarves, and a little notebook where she had written everything she remembered from their first adventure. Finn packed a small tin of Mira's shortbread cookies, just in case they needed a gift in return. As the sun dipped and the moon rose round and pale over the silvered trees, they waited. At midnight, they stepped outside. The forest was different again, transformed not by snow this time, but by silver light. Every branch shimmered as if dipped in frost, and the familiar hush returned a stillness that spoke of waiting magic. A soft breeze carried the scent of cinnamon, and then they saw it faint, glowing lights weaving through the trees like lanterns guiding them. They followed. The path was long, winding through memories and shadows, but their steps were sure. When they reached the clearing, there stood the cottage, just as they remembered: frosted rooftops, gumdrop window panes, and that faint, inviting curl of smoke from the chimney. The door opened before they could knock. Eldra stood there, smiling, her eyes crinkling with joy. "You came," she said. Lila stepped forward, heart full. "We never really left." Behind her, Finn grinned, holding out the tin of cookies. "We brought something sweet, too." Eldra laughed, a warm, round sound that filled the night. "Then, come in, my dear helpers. The oven is warm, the chocolate is melting, and the house needs its stars." And so, once again, they entered the world between snowflakes and stories, where kindness, baked into cookies, could light up the forest, and where children who listened with open hearts always found their way back, not just in dreams, but always in time for the holidays. And so the sugar stars were hung. The swan returned to the lake, and the gingerbread door closed gently behind them. But some dreams don't end when we wake. Somewhere in the stillness of snow, a red cardinal is waiting, and the oven is still warm. Thank you for wandering with us through Lila's sweet dream. Until next time, keep your heart open, your eyes curious, and your spirit just a little bit magical.